Really? Jessica said. She wished Elizabeth was there to hear Susie. And besides, Thanksgiving is best at your own home, not with strangers you don't know, Susie continued. If you come over tomorrow, maybe we could talk Liz out of wanting to go, Jessica said. Okay, Susie said quietly. I'm going to play on the jungle gym. See you later. Susie ran away. Jessica wandered over to the swings and sat down on an empty swing next to Lila. Have you noticed anything different about Susie lately? She asked Lila. I just asked her to come over after school tomorrow, and she acted kind of weird. Susie's been acting weird a lot lately, Lila replied. She even fell asleep during spelling this morning. I saw her. Suddenly Jessica had an idea. I know. My cousin Kelly acted sad and worried when Uncle Greg and Aunt Laura were thinking about getting a divorce. Maybe that's what's wrong with Susie too. Try to find out if she goes over to your house, Lila suggested. Jessica nodded and looked over at Susie. She loved secrets. And she was beginning to think that Susie was keeping a big one from everybody. Chapter 5. The Shelter. When Elizabeth and Jessica got home from school, their mother announced that she was going to take them shopping for new clothes. The department store is having a sale, Mrs. Wakefield said, as they parked downtown. You two are sprouting so fast, it's hard to keep up with you, Elizabeth laughed. I'll try not to grow anymore, Mom. Me too, Jessica said, giggling. But can we get new clothes anyway? Miss Wakefield smiled at the three of them walked hand in hand down the sidewalk. Before we shop, I want you to see something. What is it? Elizabeth asked, looking up at her mother. They stopped on the sidewalk in front of a large red building. This is the Sweet Valley Shelter for Homeless People, Mrs. Wakefield said. I wanted you to see. It isn't scary. Jessica blinked. It's right here in the middle of town. Elizabeth looked at the building. It was like any other building on the street. There's nothing creepy about it, she said. What do you think, Jessica? Mrs. Wakefield asked. It's not what you imagined, isn't it? Is it? Well, I guess not, Jessica said uncertainly. Elizabeth pointed. Look, there's even an ice cream store right next door. A girl and a little boy were standing in front of the store window when the girl turned around. Elizabeth thought that it was Susie. The boy was Susie's little brother Jim. Hi, Elizabeth called. Susie looked startled to see them. Hi, what are you doing here? We're going shopping, Jessica said. Did you ask your mom if you could come out? Elizabeth said. I can't, Susie said. She up. I can bring you home, Susie, Mrs. Wakefield said. Susie shook her head. But please, Elizabeth asked. We'll have a lot of fun. Tell your mother that I'm perfectly happy to drive you home, Mrs. Wakefield said again. Actually, I'll tell her myself. Is she buying ice cream? Susie began. She's in there, Tim spoke up. He pointed at the door of the shelter. Susie yanked her brother's hand. She looked as though she might begin to cry, but Elizabeth couldn't imagine why. "Oh, is your mother a volunteer?" Mrs. Wakefield asked. Susie nodded hastily. Yes, she is. We have to go find her now." "What's a volunteer?" Tim asked. Susie pulled him by the hand. "I'll tell you later," she said, as they hurried into the shelter to find Mrs. Nicholas. I think it's nice that Susie and her brother come along with Mrs. Nicholas Mrs. Nicholas volunteers, Mrs. Wakefield said. "So do I," Elizabeth agreed. "But she doesn't like it," Jessica said. "You could tell she didn't want us to know about it." They began to walk toward a department store again. "There's no reason to be ashamed of helping other people," Mrs. Wakefield said. "It gives you a good feeling." "Susie said it was horrible," Jessica insisted. "She told me so at recess." "It didn't look horrible," Elizabeth said. She looked over her shoulder at the red building. "I wonder why Susie acted so funny." "Because she didn't want to go inside, and neither do I," Jessica said firmly. Mrs. Wakefield sighed. "Okay, Jessica, if you feel so strongly about it, you don't have to help on Thanksgiving Day." Elizabeth was silent. She just hoped Susie wouldn't forget to ask her mother whether she could play at the Wakefields the next day. She still thought that something was bothering Susie, and she was more curious than ever about what it was. Chapter 6. Playing Dollhouse. "You can sit with me," Jessica said to Susie as they got on the school bus the following afternoon. Both she and Elizabeth were glad Susie was coming to their house. "What do you want to play when we get home?" Susie shook her head. It doesn't matter, whatever you want." "I built this great fort in the woods behind our house," Elizabeth said. "I thought you might like to see it." "We'll get dirty," Jessica said. "Let's play inside with our dollhouse. It's a nice big one. Do you have a dollhouse, Susie?" "No," Susie shook her head. "Then that's what we'll do," Jessica said, looking at Elizabeth. "Okay?" Elizabeth nodded. "Okay, that sounds like fun." When they arrived home, Jessica, Elizabeth, and Susie had a quick snack. Then they went upstairs to the twins' bedroom. The dollhouse was in the corner, filled with miniature furniture. "This is nice," Susie said. "I wish I could be a tiny doll so I could live in here. I think it would be fun to live in an apartment building like yours," Elizabeth told her. "I like riding in elevators." Susie bent down to open and shut the front door of the dollhouse. She didn't answer Elizabeth. Then she stood up. "I have to wash my hands," she said, running out of the room toward the bathroom. Jessica sat in front of the dollhouse and took out one of the miniature tables. Looking at the dollhouse reminded her of seeing homeless shelter the day before. "Liz," she said, "do you still want to help Mom and things?" "Sure," Elizabeth said. "You saw the shelter. It isn't spooky or scary or anything like that." "What about what Susie told?" Jessica said. She said it was horrible there. You can ask her yourself when she comes back. Elizabeth shrugged. It didn't matter. Remember, the Pilgrims didn't have any homes or even any food when they came to America, but the Indians shared with them. That was the first Thanksgiving. I know, Jessica said. Jessica knew Elizabeth was right. Sharing was more important. Was an important part of Thanksgiving, but she still felt nervous about going to the shelter. Susie came back into the room and Jessica nudged Elizabeth with her elbow. Ask her anyway, she whispered. Is the homeless shelter really a horrible place? Elizabeth asked Susie. Jessica said you told her it was. Yes, Susie said in a low voice. I hate it. But what's it like? Elizabeth wanted to know. Is it dark and scary inside? Well, people have to sleep on cots, Susie answered. There's lots of beds in one big room, and people hang blankets on clotheslines between them to make walls. Every morning, the people take down the blankets and put all their clothes and stuff away in big bags or suitcases. Don't they have any closets or dressers? Jessica asked. As she looked around her bedroom, she and Elizabeth each had a dresser with 5 drawers, and they shared a large walk-in closet. Susie shook her head. No, and it's noisy and crowded. Sometimes babies cry all night. And some of the people are sick and cough a lot, so it's hard for people to sleep. How do you know so much? Elizabeth asked. You must go there a lot with your mother. I do, she whispered. So you see, you wouldn't want to go there on Thanksgiving. It's really awful. Jessica and Elizabeth stared at each other. Can we play with the dollhouse now? Susie asked suddenly. I want to put the oval mirror in the little girl's room. Jessica nodded. She didn't want to talk about the homeless shelter anymore. Now that she was sure Elizabeth was going to change her mind. Chapter 7. The Ride Home. Elizabeth and Jessica and Susie were arranging the dollhouse furniture for the 3rd time when Mrs. Wakefield came into the room. Sorry, girls, she said with a smile. It's 6 o'clock. Time to take Susie home. You don't have to drive me, Susie spoke up. I can walk. Walk? Mrs. Wakefield exclaimed. You're certainly not going to walk home. It's miles from here. I'm driving you, and that's that. But Susie began. We're all going. Well, we'll all go, Jessica said. We can pretend we're princesses again. And Mom can be our chauffeur. Susie stood up slowly and followed Elizabeth and Jessica out the door. She hardly said a word as they got in the car and drove toward her apartment building. Jessica and Elizabeth tried to get Susie interested in playing princesses, but Susie wasn't paying much attention. She seemed to be daydreaming. Here we are, Mrs. Wakefield said, stopping the car in front of a tall building where Elizabeth and Jessica visited Susie several times. Susie opened the door and jumped out. Thank you, I had fun. She ran to the door of the building and went in. As Mrs. Wakefield drove away, she shook her head. I see what